Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program, brought to you by Dan Blay Racing Art and by Legend of the First Super Speedway. Joining me in the studio, Richard Youden, Louise Torres. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
Doing good, thank you. Doing good.
Doing not too bad.
Doing not too bad. Okay, all right. You used a lot of extra words to say doing good. So,
I always do it anyway.
Yeah, I know, Louise. That's why I love you, man. But when pretty quiet weekend in racing, with it being Easter Sunday, although NASCAR did race on Easter, which drew the ire of some people that don't believe NASCAR should be racing on Easter Sunday, you know, mainly your religious folks. But to their credit, I mean, they started the race in the evening at 7 p.m. And Easter, you know, much like Christmas, is a holiday where most of your celebration kind of things are done in the morning and and have a nice brunch. So I didn't see it as a huge issue. There were plenty of folks there in the stands that didn't seem to see it as a huge issue. They spent their Easter evening at Bristol, where they covered it with dirt. And personally, where last year's race was a mess, I thought they did a much better job this year with the track surface. And they had a couple of rain delays, but it was pretty amazing how quickly they were ready to get that track ready to go racing. There were two different occasions I thought for sure they were going to call the race and we were going to be done, but we went ahead and went the full distance, which is 133 miles, 250 laps. And at the end of the day, it was Kyle Busch sneaking the win from young Tyler Reddick, Reddick was great the last stage of the race, but he got into a little bit of trouble trying to maintain that position. And who was it that came up behind him? See, now I draw blank.
Had a little bit of trouble because Chase Briscoe was hunting him down.
Yeah, Chase Briscoe, right? Chase Briscoe name just escaped me. Yeah, so those two touched a little bit, and both spun, and Kyle Busch was able to sneak on by and have a win fall in his lap, much to the delight of the crowd who booed him when he didn't do anything other than just cross the line. But I got to say, again, Chase Briscoe and Tyler Reddick, along with Ross Chastain, these young guys are really making their name known in NASCAR. They're all having great seasons, despite the fact that Tyler Reddick has not won yet. And as I look at this, Louise, right, if you see the post-race interviews there, right, Reddick was not rattled at all. As a matter of fact, he kind of blamed himself. He said, "I didn't do a good enough job by not holding him off. I didn't do a good job by not holding him off, and I shouldn't have had myself in that position." And then I kind of wonder if while I find that to be admirable that he's so kind of cool and calm and restrained in his comments there and appear to not be rattled. But I wonder if that's why he hasn't won a race, because I often think that sometimes these drivers need that aggression, And,
we saw it with him and Cole Custer at Kansas.
Yeah.
The Xfinity race, Reddick has had moments with driver confrontations. It's just this one was much more metal because I think they knew it was a racing ordeal. And they've raced each other long enough, and they both have dirt backgrounds to where they knew they're aware, unlike another aware who had an episode with another driver we'll talk about later. But awareness that nothing bad was going to happen. It wasn't like Kyle Busch or Joey Logano Reddick had to deal with with Chase Briscoe we're talking about. And with Briscoe, the thing to me is that he said he also put blame on himself because he felt like at that moment he was giving it us all, by the way, I think he might have wheel hopped or something to where the car got too loose and just lost it. Some people say, oh, he took him out of desperation. Oh, that was reckless. Like Dale Jarrett said, it's like, to me, I saw it as just a racing ordeal where the dirt is not easy. It's not easy when it comes to handling a car. It's not. And even the best will have moments where they simply try as best they can. And if they can't do much about it, they can't do much about it. That's why I saw Briscoe must have just completely lost it. He didn't just lost it to take him out.
Yeah, you can't really gather it back up as quickly on dirt as you can on pavement, because once you start that slide, and we saw that with, Reddick tried to gather it up, but then it just eventually got away from him, and he almost pulled it off.
Yeah, he almost had
but Kyle,
bigger gap.
Kyle got by him right there at the last moment. So anyway, end of the day, good job to those guys. Both of them, they both walk away with good points finishes.
Not Briscoe. Well, Briscoe's already has that Phoenix win, but he finished 22nd, which surprised me. Like, what? I thought Briscoe crossed the line, and then I looked at the running orders. He finished 22nd in that thing. Whereas
I must have missed that. I thought he made it across the line too. So
he didn't.
Reddick was categorized second though.
Yeah, 3/10 shy of probably pulling a pirouette and a win, which would have been interesting if he actually, because that could have probably been, well, I don't think you consider it as, would you consider it as a spin and win, even though he kind of got taken out by by the loss of physics of dirt racing? Had Reddick pulled it off, would you deem it as a spin and win or no?
No, not really.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. It's like, it's more like a crashing over the line, like a Terry Labonte,
Yeah. But speaking of that, what I appreciate is that both of them handle it man to man. Like it's like, to me, I immediately thought of Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch after Darlington, to where they both talked about it, like where Kurt talked about he had no more power steering, and then Craven just talked about just relishing the moment. They both kind of like, yeah. And Briscoe said it like he wished that Reddick would have had won it, because that way it was very diplomatic, which is very refreshing. But yeah. As far as like Reddick being the nice guy and all that, maybe that's why he has to win. It started giving me like Mark Martin vibes, which we do need some Mark Martin in this world, where they don't get where they can understand what's going on, or we need those type of people instead of like, you want a good balance of drivers as far as personalities and attitudes that we have not really seen much these days, especially on the Xfinity level or even in trucks at this point too.
Yeah, I mean, again, I appreciate Reddick being kind of so calm and collected, but it's that whole, oh shucks, didn't win. You know what I mean? It's you almost like to see a driver kind of aggravated that they don't win, because you feel these guys are here to win, and nothing against Reddick, but and to your point, yes, it is refreshing, but at the same time, I find it out of character for what you'd expect in a post-race interview for a guy who came that close to winning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Or even if there was bitter disappointment, I'd be fine if there was bitter disappointment, but he was more like, oh shucks, I didn't hold him off, darn, we'll try next week. So I don't know, but anyway, the future looks bright for the kid. Future looks a little better for RCR, who's been a while since they've won anything. I think it's been since Austin Dillon had a win a couple years ago.
Yeah, but Reddick RCR has gotten better over time, and I think adding Reddick has been an elevation, because people forget when he was with JRM, he wasn't even probably the third best driver in that organization when he won the championship. And then he moves to RCR, and then boom, pretty much elevated, outperforming his equipment day in and day out. And I feel like they're still in that position, but they're in a better state, to say the least, if they keep Reddick. And I think over time, if Reddick gets it together and racks up wins, maybe fight for championships. If I were RC, I would, or Mike Dillon, I would not give him up. I would not let him go. I would keep him as long as you can to build the team around him if possible. And that word is key, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's going to see what opportunities come his way. And there's right now, I think NASCAR is probably in a state where they're not like where IndyCar was a couple of years ago, where all the seats were pretty well locked up, and then all of a sudden, just recently, a lot of the dominoes started falling. A lot of the older guys started retire. I think NASCAR is in kind of like a half and half state right there. Where you've got some guys that are pushing retirement age, but really, honestly, not so many. Because we just recently had an exodus, between Gordon and Earnhardt and them. But you got and of course Jimmy Johnson have all left the series and opened those seats. So, but you got just a very few guys in there who are kind of maybe pushing retirement age, maybe Harvick, or Denny Hamlin, even over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we'll see some of those guys perhaps move on. So I don't expect tons and tons of new faces in the next immediate future, but there will be some opportunities out there.
No, for sure. I think it's going to be tough to see who will get the moves. I'm going to may have to start with like middle to bottom tier equipment, which is going to be interesting how the rookie of the year contendership landscape will look like in a couple of years.
Yeah, because you got guys ready to move up here, like Ty Gibbs. Probably within 2 years he'll probably take Truex's seat. Or maybe even Kyle Busch's seat. I don't know. I feel like Kyle's probably got several more years left in him, but Truex keeps, kind of almost taking it a year at a time. And Truex also has the, health concerns with his. He's not married. They're not married.
No.
Are they? His longtime companion, she's had the health issues there. So that could very well also be weighing on his decision to maybe get out of the sport at some, or at least decrease his involvement to less than full time, which would open up a seat for Ty Gibbs. So, because Gibbs isn't going to land anywhere else except Gibbs. So that seems like a foregone conclusion. So,
yeah. But we'll be curious to see how the landscape does look like. Because right now, like I talked about in a Twitter space before the truck race, if we didn't have this 4-car limit or charters, the landscape would look completely different. If the sponsorship and money is there, there'll be teams that were going to 5 cars or maybe more, if it's feasible to them, if they're ready. But we're not in that landscape. I don't think we're going to see that landscape change anytime soon.
No, I think
makes you wonder.
I think finances alone, there's not enough sponsorship money going around the sport to support, 5 and 6 car teams.
No, that's true. If that thing, I think like it's kind of become to the point where we're over a decade and a half with that 4-car limit cap. And I think sooner or later, they got to just find a way to say, you know what? I think it's time to end the cap. I mean, the truck series don't have a 4-truck team cap. That's why you see Thor Sport and GMS enter like 5 or 6 trucks from time to time.
Well, even if you did remove the cap, I don't see a ton of people taking advantage of it. Honestly, I don't.
Probably not.
You'll maybe see 1, maybe 2 big super teams out there. But I think, once you get past that 4-car mark, I think it becomes pretty hard to manage performance. And we've seen that. We've seen that in IndyCar whenever, Andretti has expanded to when they've tried to run 5 full-time cars. They've really done worse than when they've had 4 and 3, I mean,
Penske right now,
Penske seems to always run better when they run leaner. Penske, when they've gone to 4 cars, they've always had at least one that's been a bit of a non-performer, or the whole team performance is okay but not great. But when they lean down to 3, like this year, they've been unbeatable so far. So
yeah, I'll be curious how their month of May will look like, because that's gonna be the ultimate test when it comes to race day, because they've sort of been there. Like if the cards are in their favor, they're there, but they're not there to win. And also qualifying has not been kind to them either lately. So it'd be curious. That's one of the big mysteries. How will Penske qualify for the 500? Of course, the big picture is trying to win, but if they're closer to the front, it'll help their odds when we get there next month.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's always better to qualify towards the front.
I forget about, you mentioned Chastain. Like Chastain was in the mix, and then during the first red flag, the car just pretty much was done. The engine, the reliability ended on him in there, where he couldn't continue on to the stage 3. So he took a pretty hit in the points, and also didn't get the best result either but had it not had the reliability problem, he'd probably been in that mix as well, more than likely.
Sure, yeah, and Daniel Suarez, another guy who had a really good run, but didn't have a lot to show for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was one of those track house where when both cars do really well, but results wise shows one doing well over the other, because there's always circumstances with that team. That's been the theme of this year. It's like both of them are capable to get really strong results, but more often than not, it's always one or the other that have problems.
Right, absolutely. So, and if am I correct in saying that Kyle Busch winning, that's first Toyota win this year, is it not?
It is their third.
Okay,
what did
Hamlin I miss?
Won. Richmond.
Oh, that's right. Denny Hamlin won. So
they won 2 out of their last 3 races.
Okay, so yeah, so where they started off the season kind of behind the competition, it looked like we're leveling out a little bit, because it's been a minute since a good Ford win, when Ford came out of the box so strong at the beginning of the season. So it looks like everybody's starting to figure out their Gen 7 car. And again, I'll just say I was kind of disappointed about how the Gen 7 cars performed at both Martinsville and Richmond, but they were so much better on the dirt than I thought they would be. Going into it, I was thinking to myself, this is a car that's really designed to handle a road course really well. How is it going to perform on dirt? And I thought it was just going to be a mess, but I was pleasantly surprised to see. It
actually got better with the rain. It seems
it did. I thought the Gen 7 car was a fine car on the dirt there. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you're Kevin Harvick, for the most part. I think right now, when Harvick heard the news of that they're coming back to Bristol during 2023, must have stormed that door, confronted in that big red truck, and confronted whoever's in charge with the calendar, licorice pizza style. If you've not seen a certain scene, I suggest so, because that's the vibe I'm getting from Harvick, who is big fan of dirt racing. Not.
Yeah. Well, maybe it is time for Harvick to retire. I don't know. So, but I want to. I don't know.
I don't know about that though.
I want to think Harvick still got a few good years in the tank there. Yeah, because he still can get up to the front and run there. It just seemed like he's not.
The thing is, the Stewart-Haas racing were appalling. Aside from Briscoe, Custer had his like the grill problem where they wouldn't give him his laps back. They had that little grill cleaning break in the first stage. But other than that, aside from those two, it was just a forgettable week for SHR otherwise, and the results show, with the exception of Briscoe, that doesn't reflect on how he performed.
Yeah, it seems like they have more forgettable weeks than they have memorable ones anymore. So, it's really kind of up to them to kind of reassess, where the issues lie and why they're not the powerhouse they once were. But anyway, so we had Xfinity and trucks also race on the dirt this weekend.
No Xfinity, just trucks.
Just trucks. Okay, so
you had the most. Before I'll get to the most absurd moment of the week. Yeah, it was before I forget, I'm having a little bit of a pause. I'm trying to remember who won the truck race, because I know who won it, but I'm having like you said with Briscoe, that's kind of what I'm having right now. But I'll talk about the bumper game.
Ben Rhodes, wasn't it?
Yeah, Ben Rhodes. Thank you. Ben Rhodes was able to get his first win since the Daytona Road Course 14 months ago. So he hasn't. So in the year he won the championship, he only won the first 2 races, and hadn't won since till Saturday. You had Buddy Kofoid, a super talented dirt racer in the USAC competition, made his NASCAR debut. He was doing really good, but then he got collected in a late race incident to plummet him down in the running order. But he was doing really well. I thought maybe if he was getting there to a point that he might have had a chance to probably win in his truck debut. And Ty Majeski also had a superb ran dirt before. And I think he did exceptionally well. It kind of shows you, and it's a saying, like the dirt racing kind of shows who has kind of like the all-around talent and skill as far as a racer. And if Majeski was able to do just fine with little to no dirt experience at all, kind of shows you what kind of a talent Majeski is and has been over the years in the short track competition. He just has not gotten the big break in NASCAR that I think he rightfully deserves at this point. But yeah, Rhodes was able to win, and Deegan had another woeful weekend. It has been the tale of her season where she's struggling to even stay in the top 30 in truck owner points, and going to Darlington, she might be borderline. She still may be borderline whether or not she'll make the field. That's kind of
she may not make the field. Yeah. So all right, so let's talk about these two trucks that got locked together like two teenagers with braces kissing one another, and they got locked together like that.
Yeah, Austin Wayne Self, who stayed out after stage one, held on okay for a little bit, and then he was regressing, and then Matt DiBenedetto ran into him. They just kind of locked up and thinking, they're going to try to, is DiBenedetto try to take Austin Wayne Self, as Austin Wayne Self deliberately brake checking him, and then both of them were going so slow that they stopped, and then realized from there, like the Aces song from 2018, Stuck, they're just stuck. What made it more maddening is like, oh, okay, just pull them out and maybe it'll just be a lengthy yellow. Why not? I can understand. No, they decided to stop the race. Like, why? It's like that was not necessary in my book. It was a hissy fit at the house over like, why? For stuck bumpers is like the most random red flag you can get. It says, oh, we're stopping the race so we can pull these two trucks out of there, like the Offspring song that says you got to keep them separated. You literally have to keep them separated. Or like in the school, like in Greece, where you get too close, you're out of the competition. You're out of the dance contest. It's like, this is what, geez, they're willing to throw red flags for anything these days.
But we're just throwing all the weird references in there. The dance contest in Greece, yeah. Oh, that's funny. It is what it is, but
it
certainly is, yeah. All right, so we're off at Talladega, which is going to be interesting. The Daytona 500 was it wasn't too shabby with the Gen 7 cars. We probably see very similar kind of race here at Talladega. Coming up, Talladega is always a big event. It's always fun to watch. It's always well attended, and I expect that this year, we're going back to full attendance. We should have a great crowd on hand there. We should have lovely Alabama, late April, early May weather. So let's talk about Alabama and so if we think about who's done well at the plate race there, we got to look at the Penske cars. We got to look at the RFK cars. We've got to talk about Bubba Wallace, who's the last guy to win at Talladega, albeit in the rain. So, Louise, who do you like for Talladega?
I feel like you honestly think you cannot go wrong with Bubba, but I think if RFK are really going to bounce back indeed, I'm not going to go with BK though. I'm thinking this has a good chance of Chris Buescher maybe pulling the deal. It says Talladega can be unpredictable. I'm going with an unpredictable winner. Let's go with Chris Buescher to bring RFK back on the map in terms of, because ever since that win in the duels when they had that first trouble with NASCAR, they have been MIA completely. Well, except for the 500 where Keselowski had a rough day in terms of running into other people.
Yeah, but let's talk about Keselowski then, okay? So obviously, like I said, they've been MIA and really buried in the points due to penalties and those sort of things there too. But
Keselowski specifically.
Keselowski is running I don't know if you've seen his livery, white Castrol. White car, white suit. It's a stunningly beautiful white car. Reminds me of his Miller Lite white car, where he won a championship and a lot of races with Penske. And I wonder if that white Castro livery is going to give him some good mojo at Talladega. Talladega track that he has performed very, very well at, has a couple of wins there in the past. So I'm going to go with Keselowski. and say that RFK, kind of gets themselves out of the bottom of the barrel in the points there. And even with the win, he still may not make the chase with all the penalties that they've accrued. But that team needs something good to happen to them. For sure. So now as we move on from NASCAR, the Indy cars were off on Easter weekend, but this week we did see the first open test at Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the cars that will be competing in the 500 here in the month of May. So leading up to that, we had several. We did not have an announcement for a 33rd car, although Yunkos has said that is as a last resort. They pretty much said, well, if nobody else will do it, we are sitting on a spare chassis. We can either prepare it and lease it to somebody or prepare and run it for somebody. So they said they would be willing, but they'd rather not. And then on the heels of that, McLaren announced that they would be open to running a fourth entry, although it's the time is getting short.
Yeah, and they've already announced their liveries for the 500.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to talk about, the livery reveal. So let's talk about, we saw Sage Karam's livery. He's got a sponsorship by AES, which is Indiana utility company. Yep.
Yeah, the same livery, same team from last year where Kara got a top 10 out of it.
Right. So it's a nice car. It's blue and white, right? And Marco has a livery. His is largely blue, light blue and yellow. Very nice looking car for Marco. Really good looking car for Marco, as a matter of fact. Tony Kanaan has been announced in the American Legion car. That'll be the 5th Ganassi engine. He will be running the number 1, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But that's it's kind of a livery that's basically white with some red, white, and blue trim on it with American Legion, and he's they're running to support or bring awareness to veteran suicide, which is a worthy cause that the American Legion is involved with. So good on Ganassi and good on Tony for helping support that. And again, Tony's always performed well at the Speedway there, and in a Ganassi car. I kind of like his chances, even as a one-off. But as in, you need to look no further than some of the Indy 500 winners to know that a one-off can win the race. You look no further than a Dan Weldon or a Elio Castro Neves last year. So Tony's not going to be out of the mix by any step of the imagination. So McLaren released their liveries. They have 3 cars and all 3 different liveries. Now the 3 cars all have the body of the car, right? So say that the cockpit and the nose, the one car is black, the other car is white. The third car is a color I would describe as it's similar to British racing green, which honestly I don't understand, because McLaren, while they are based in England, they're not really a British team. They have roots in New Zealand, and then when the team was when Bruce McLaren ceased to own the team after he died, Teddy Mayer took over the team. Teddy Mayer was American. They were known as an Anglo-American team. Now you could say during the Ron Dennis ownership years, when Group 4 or Project 4 bought it, then they were a British team. But now Zach Brown, the current owner, he's an American guy too. So British racing green is a color I've never seen associated with McLaren, but yet there it is. Now, all these cars have asymmetrical designs, or designs that are not symmetrical at all. Where they
think that's British? You think it's not British racing green?
It's too brownish. Quite. Yeah,
it used to be a little brighter.
I'm not quite sure what to call it, but it's definitely green, and it's definitely a color I've not seen associated with.
It's more camo green than anything else.
It is kind of a camo green. But then on top of that, then we have the cars have orange and blue side pods, right? Orange on one side, blue on the other, and the wings are back. And it's just the only way I can describe these cars is, what's the word? Ugly. Okay.
Yeah. I have another word for it that I will not say on air.
A word you can't say in there. Yeah.
And if that green was black, I think they'd look pretty striking. I
if they didn't have the green, it'll look striking indeed.
Yeah, well, the 5 car is black. That's Pato.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about the right side where it's green. Where if there was no green on the side, it was like
Olive green.
Yeah, he does say.
Okay, so it's the color scheme include undefeated signature olive green. So are they a sponsor undefeated? I don't know who that is.
I don't
I
know.
don't know. And Montoya's comes across like a generic
Oh, sorry. so
generic
undefeated are the
iRacing car that
design. Okay.
forgot to add trading paints or whatever the slogan is.
All right, so now, Richard, what were you saying there?
Sorry. So let me just read this to you very quickly. This is from the official McLaren press release. For the second consecutive year, Arrow, McLaren SP, and Views will partner with global sportswear brand Undefeated to collaborate on design and inspiration across the team for this year's 106th running of the Indianapolis 500. He goes on to say a little bit later, the colour scheme includes Undefeated signature olive green along with the colours of Arrow, McLaren, SP. So, yeah. I don't know who this Undefeated is or what they're getting out of it, but it looks like somebody's vomited on half the car.
Well, maybe when it comes to ugly car contests, they're undefeated.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the
anyway.
word that Richard just said is that's what I was referring to, but I didn't want to say it out loud.
Yeah. So let's get back to Tony Kanaan and the number 1, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I promised you guys earlier I would try to explain a few things about how the number 1 is used in IndyCar racing, okay? So now, obviously, we know that the number 1 can be used by the series champion if they choose to. Alex Palou has chosen not to, which is pretty much it's been a trademark of guys that win the championship for Ganassi. They usually keep their regular number. Dixon has kept his 9. Franchitti kept his 10. And Palou has kept his number 10 now. Although Chip has the rights to use the number 1, so they went ahead and put it on Tony Kanaan's car. I imagine at the bequest of American Legion, they probably like that idea of running the 1. Now, last year, J.R. Hildebrand ran the number 1 on the Foyt car, and that was a tribute livery to one of A.J. Foyt's cars from the 60s where he had won the race with the number 1. And Foyt had to seek the permission and probably write a check to Chip Ganassi to use that number 1 last year. Now, these things aside, usually the number 1 is reserved for the champion. All right. And it goes back to the days when the number 1 would go to the USAC champion. And if you won the USAC championship, you could run the number 1 the following season, including the Indy 500. Now, it gets a little murky when we get into the kart era because the kart, if you won the kart championship, you can run the number 1 on your car during the kart season, although the Indy 500 was still sanctioned by USAC. Now, as the USAC races dwindled, the winner of the Indy 500 was still considered the USAC champion, the USAC Gold Crown champion. Although I believe after 1983, the only race included in the USAC championship was the Indianapolis 500. So there's a little bit of a misconception that the winner of the Indy 500 can choose the number 1 for the following year. And this comes from the fact that the winner of the Indy 500 was also the USAC champion. So you saw several instances in the 80s and 90s say where, Michael Andretti won the championship in 1991, was running the number 1, but he had to yield the number 1 for the month of May. Or actually it was
Michael had a 1 in 1992.
He did. Yeah. So, but okay, so this is Michael had to yield his number, and Al Unser Jr. won the championship in 89, so or 90. Unser Jr. won the championship in 90, right? Right, because Sullivan, yeah. And Unser Jr. had the yield the 1 because Ari Leindyke wanted to use the 1 in the Indy 500. So Al Unser Jr. took the 2. Well, the 2 was Michael's number, so Michael had to take the 10, which was the next available number. So, but this is kind of where the thought is that the Indy 500 winner has first crack at the number 1, but it's not the case. It's the USAC champion. And of course, after 1996, when the Indy Racing League started up, the USAC championship ceased to exist altogether. And I believe it even ceased to exist a little bit before that, although the race was still sanctioned by USAC. Now, that being said, you had mentioned George Snyder running the number 1 in 1983 after Gordon Johncock had won the 500. Well, because there were still a couple other races on the USAC calendar that Johncock did not actually compete in because he was running the full kart series, but George Snyder was the USAC champion for 1982, thus why he ran the number 1 in 1983. So, I mean, I hope that kind of clears that up. But for a while, I mean, I've always taken a great interest in how cars are numbered, and I kind of like the way that IndyCar does it now, because CART had about the worst system. And the way their system worked is that the first 12 cars in the championship would be numbered 1 through 12 for the following season, unless you didn't like your number, in which case you could pull a different number from the pool of remaining numbers, i.e., say like a Greg Moore, who maybe he finished 4th or 5th in the championship, but wanted to continue to run the 99. So you would be number 5 unless you don't want to be. So you got so much ambiguity there. And then, of course, the 13 was disallowed, and the 14 was reserved for AJ Foyt. It was the only number that was reserved. So what you had was guys would have a different number every year, which from a merchandising point of view it makes no sense. You buy a shirt with the guy's name and number and a picture of his car, then the next year he's got a different number. And that's where I think, NASCAR had it right with the numbers belong to the team. And so long as you stay with the same team, you have the same number. And that's a system that IndyCar uses now. The numbers belong to the team. So as long as you're with the same team, you've got the same number. Now, Formula One, their system goes to, it used to be that if you won the championship, you had all the cars had team numbers, right? So like Tyrrell traditional team numbers were 2 and 3. Ferrari's traditional team
3
numbers.
and 4.
I'm sorry, 3 and 4. Yeah, Ferraris were 11 and 12. The Lotus
27 and 28, wasn't it?
Well, they were 11.
Was 11
they
and
were
12,
11
and
and 12. This is what I'm getting at, right? Ferrari's numbers were 11 and 12, but when you win the championship, right, you would take the 1 and 2 for the next season. Now your numbers would go to whoever you just took the 1 and 2 from. So that's how these numbers got switched around.
Because Williams.
Yeah. So 27 and 28 were traditionally Williams numbers, right? But, Ferrari won the championship in 79, right? So they took the 1 and 2 from Lotus, and that's when Lotus got the 11 and 12. But then Williams won the championship the next year. Williams picked up the 1 and 2. Then the 27 and 28 went to Ferrari. Again, a little confusing. And of course, Formula One system now is probably the most merchandising friendly system of all, because the driver picks his number and keeps it throughout the bulk or throughout the entirety of his Formula One career, unless he chooses to use the 1 when he wins a championship. So that way, even if if Lewis Hamilton changes teams, all his merchandise is still says 44 on it, is still, is still pertinent to him. So I find it very interesting how cars are numbered this day and age. And now I do like the idea that we have a kind of a merchandising eyeball on that. Because, in the early days of Formula One, you would have a different number every race based on the timing of the entry. Because if you look at pictures from 1973, just Google Images, type in Jackie Stewart 1973, and look at the images that come up and see they have about 5-6 different numbers. So what kind of sense does that make?
That's probably why it was painted they painted the numbers for a good period of time in the beginning, because there was no guarantee what number you'll be. Yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's the long and short of it. If anybody's kind of wondering why is Tony Kanaan running the 1, because Ganassi owns the number thanks to Palou's championship. So, hope that wasn't
also the Be the One initiative.
Yes,
from American Legion.
Right. Yep. There's sometimes the numbers are sponsor driven too. If you recall, Schmidt used to use different numbers. They used to use 77 was their number, but when they picked up Arrow was a big fan of the number 5 because one of their logos is 5 years ahead. So that's where the 5 ended up with the Arrow cars and where it still remains. But if you recall, back when Simon was driving for them, before Arrow was their sponsor, there was 77. So there you go. All right. So speaking of which, let's talk about the test at Indy. Okay. So we did have one other announcement from Beth Peretta and Peretta Racing. They are going to run Simona Di Silvestro in 3 races, which I believe are Road America, Portland, and Nashville, if I'm not mistaken.
Road America, Mid-Ohio, and Nashville.
Mid-Ohio and Nashville. Okay, yeah.
At the very least, those are confirmed. They might look into other ones when scheduling permits.
Right, and she's going to run in conjunction with Ed Carpenter. So they're going to skip the 500 for a couple of reasons. Number one, they could probably run these 3 races on the same budget that they would spend running one Indy 500. Number two, Carpenter's already running 3 cars at the 500, so all of his resources will be taken up with those 3 cars, but they're only running 2 cars at these road courses, so they'll have additional personnel and whatnot that can go on Beth Peretta's payroll that can be utilized to crew that car on those race weekends. So, and again, this is a step towards Peretta Motorsport eventually becoming a full-time entrant in the series. Yeah, that's their goal. That's the end goal. Yeah, that's the end goal for a lot of these folks. So, and some of them make it there, and some of them don't. And we see that Shank is finally, he started out doing a couple races here, a couple races there, but now he's in for 2 cars full time. And then the other hot rumor regards McLaren Arrow, who is perhaps they've talked about expanding to 3 cars for next year on a full-time basis. And the hot name linked to that is Alexander Rossi. It's probably not a secret that Rossi isn't happy at Andretti. It's not a secret that it's a contract year for him. And even though both sides have denied it, the rumor's pretty strong that it'll be Rossi in the 3rd McLaren car next year. So speaking of Rossi, when we began testing today, Rossi was the first guy to spin on cold tires. But we saw a lot of it was a long session today. They had a rain delay early, but they pretty much once they got the track dry, they ran from around noon or 1 all the way till 6 p.m. with a small break in between. So you got a lot of guys get a lot of laps in, a lot of data. We saw a few problems, Louise. Namely, the last 80 minutes or so, we saw Elio actually got some pretty good damage to his car, spun coming out of the pit lane, back up onto the track, tried to keep it off the wall. We saw Ericsson spin it a couple of times. We saw
Ericsson avoided incidents.
Right.
Yeah, barely got through it.
Yeah, and then we saw Will Power kind of lose it there, and he's again, just like Elio and Will were both kind of unsure what happened. They both said it just seemed out. The car just stepped out, and Power ended up collecting Colton Herta, who brushed the wall trying to avoid Power. So, but otherwise, nothing, no major pileups or crashes there, but a lot of laps run, a lot of data gathered. So, Louise, you got to watch some of this today, or?
Yeah, I was able to catch up as much as info as I could, kind of to absorb it, because of course with my night job and sleeping hours coinciding with the session, I had to play catch up. But when I saw all the madness was happening towards the end, which is unfortunate to see already that we have wrecked cars, because if I recall, it wasn't until deep into the month of May where we saw these incidents happening, and it's attributed to the weather and the conditions as well, to where you mentioned it was delayed a bit. That's where the bit I caught live, and it could have been really bad, but unfortunately it wasn't as worse as what it could have been, because I looked at Colton Herta's onboard that he just tweeted about a bit ago. That could have been awful. That could have been awful if Power went a little bit further. And I think in the back of Power's mind, or whoever said it, there was this close to probably having a Sonardi moment, because remember when Sonardi had that accident in Germany, it was coming out of pit road, or even last year's 500, albeit that was because of the lug nut wasn't secured, where he lost control at the exit of pit road. That could have been much worse. So the fact that we've only seen, with the exception of Herta and Power, just single car incidents, is better than is a lot better than having more than one car totaled or worse. So that's why I mentioned Ericsson escaping the madness, because he was that close of being involved in the Elio one, and also he was that close of being involved in the Power and Herta one. But yeah, it's just something that going into the Thursday test session that hopefully it's improved upon. Maybe they have to dry it up a lot more, so in case if there's some wet spots, like Power said, doesn't happen on Thursday, and then we can have a much thorough test session where there's no concerns for it, depending on weather, of course.
Yeah. Again, the weather conditions were not ideal. I believe the temperatures in the morning were 56 degrees, which it's tough to get to. I mean, you need to look no further than the 92 Indy 500, where the race was run in conditions that were that cold, where you just saw guys seemingly every time we had a restart when the tires were cold, you saw guys just cars just stepping out from underneath them. So, Richard, did you get a chance to watch any of these cars running in Indianapolis today, or were you too busy working?
Yeah, I was too busy, unfortunately. Did catch a few highlights at the end, but mainly as we were talking about some of the spins and the contact with the wall, which is it's always unfortunate to have these events happen so early in the in this sort of in the event, really, because they can rebuild the cars, but they're never quite the same, and hopefully it won't affect too many of them.
Herta might be okay. Elio, I'm not 100% sure, because he took a pretty good hit. Because I think Herta said something like in the attenuator ordeal over there in his test interview. So Herta might be okay. Power's going to be fine. Elio's the big question, because he took the significant beating on the back end of his car. And as far as the rest of the session goes, a couple of people stood out, and there's a couple of rookies, but the one in particular that caught my eye at session's end, where Scott Dixon was quickest at 227, was Colin Mylock. We talk about Hyunko's; they're obviously going to be forever known for the time being as the little team that beat the McLaren into the 500 field. Ilott had a pretty solid, it looked to be a really solid session, which is good for them, which might make Rookie of the Year for the 500 very interesting. And then Johnson in the veteran session, because he was a part of the veterans, he was a part of the rookie refresh because he's a full-time driver along with Grosjean. And same with Elio, he's full-time, so you don't have to take the refresh. Johnson was up there too, so it was a pretty strong opener for Ganassi as a whole, to say the least. But yeah, like, and another one that kind of stood out a bit is also Devlin DiFrancesco. He looked like he was very sporty. The only one that I saw in the classification that didn't partake out of the 32 confirmed entrants was Sage Karam. Yeah, Karam had, as we talked about, he had the sponsorship ordeal announced and all of that. He didn't set officially a time in as far as the all car session. Santino, on the other hand, his teammate for the 500, just has the all black 23 car for the time being, I'd imagine. He also looked pretty good up there, but it's kind of hard telling. You got to look at practice speeds like with toe and no toe speed, because no toe will tell you how they are in terms of single car runs and qualifying. Toes see who is effective in the draft, and that's always going to be key during the month of May.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that no toe speed tells you who's going to be watch out for in qualifying. But if you're pretty quick with the toe, it means you got a pretty good race set up. It means your car's pretty stable in traffic. So that'll be interesting to watch. So, all right. So we are heading to Imola in Formula One. So Richard, one of the classic tracks here, we're heading in to Ferrari home territory with Ferrari. With a very good car this year, with a couple of wins under their belt, so it's gonna be pretty nuts out there.
Oh, it's gonna be great, isn't it? It's gonna be crazy to get the sort of the Tifosi back there and screaming and shouting and doing their thing. It's going to be pretty special. and the to see those cars up front with a real chance of winning. Leclerc has obviously started the season very convincingly. 2 wins and a second place, and fastest lap in all 3 races and 2 poles. The guys looking pretty hot, and I don't think there's any reason to doubt that they'll continue with that performance coming up this weekend. But for the first time in 2022, we see the return of the sprint race format. So we'll have 1 practice session on Friday, qualifying Friday afternoon, practice session Saturday morning, and then the sprint race Saturday afternoon. And the results from the sprint race determines the lineup for the full race weekend. For the full race on Sunday afternoon. So it's it'd be good to see that there's been a few changes to the way the sprint races work. I can't remember the exact format now. Let me see what I can find. But they have changed that. So let's have a look. Sprint races. I thought there was a change in the number of points that were being allocated to the sprint race, but I may be wrong in that. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. A couple of the sprint races last year were really good. A couple were not quite so good.
It's still a work in progress.
Was,
Still a work in progress in my mind. I think the jury's still out with a lot of fans. Some folks like it. Other folks think it's the most heinous thing that Formula One ever could have done. But you're always going to have divided fan bases like that in any form of racing.
Yeah, of course. But it'd be good to, as you say, one of the classic tracks. I think they've extended their contract out for a number of years. I think it's 2025. I think so. It'll be there for a good few more years. So it's going to be really good to see and see what they can. 2025 is so we'll be going there for a good number of years, and it was great to see. In a way, they've sort of picked up the, they've one of the circuits that have really made the most out of the whole COVID situation. So, good for them, and it's good to be back there and see what the racing can produce.
Right. Then on the heels of Monza, on the heels of Imola, we'll pack them and head to the United States for the Grand Prix in Miami, which will take place in early May. And so there was a little news there, some last-ditch efforts by some local opposition groups to try to get the Grand Prix blocked, but their efforts fell short. I think with all the money that's been spent, they're a little too late to try to, they're arguing, about the noise and the noise and not having the proper permits for the noise and whatnot. But I mean, it's the same kind of NIMBY mindset that seems to hamper a lot of the so-called street races there. It's the same kind of thing that's threatening some smaller tracks like Lime Rock Park up in Connecticut. Where they, when a track is built, it's fine. But as, urban sprawl creeps up around it, suddenly you have, folks that don't like the noise, but
what ultimately stopped Washington having a Cup venue in the late 2000s or building one for it.
Right. But you get these groups in these street races to try to, now, and if you recall, that's had a lot to do. Local opposition had a lot to do with kill the Boston Grand Prix. That combined with the fact that the promoter was a swindler and a crook, but local opposition was strong up in Boston. If you recall, City of Boston also killed their bid to hold the Olympics, right, which would have brought a massive amount of money to the economy. But the local opposition groups were able to successfully kill the Olympics in Atlanta. So I'm kind of pleased here that these folks in Miami efforts were stopped short, because again, we're going around in a football stadium here, right? So this is an area that's used to large crowds and a lot of traffic and whatnot, and And you're talking about people that live 2 miles away. I mean, how loud is it going to be 2 miles away? You know, is it going to be enough to damage your hearing? I doubt it. So, but again, so that race looked like it's ready to go. The tickets are enormously expensive. So it's not something.
You can go to every IndyCar race in under general admission fee. All 17 rounds you could go, and granted for one total of a Grand Prix ticket in Miami.
I know, right? It's nuts. Yeah. So I had
sold out though, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah. So
you can't be, it's supply and demand, isn't it? You know, it's like the tickets for these events are so expensive. Yeah, but they're still out.
Yeah, and it's in Miami.
Unfortunately, it probably limits the access to the normal fan, if you like, in terms of the expense. But from a promoter standpoint, I wouldn't say they don't care who turns up, but their job is to sell tickets and make money. And you sell 100,000 tickets at $1,000 or 100,000 tickets at $50. Which are you going to do?
Yeah, and also you have the W Series, which also could bring some good exposure to the American fans to see the Jamie Chadwick and all those people. And I think there's also one other supporting series going there as well for Miami, along with W and F1. So
they're not bringing Formula 2 or anything like that?
I don't think so.
No,
I
I
have
don't
not
think
heard
so.
much. All I know is the W Series and I think the Porsche Cup or whatever the equivalent is down there.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
it'll be
I think that's
interesting. It'll be interesting when we get there. But the one thing I want to point out about Imola is the sprint race where they changed it a lot to where if you're fastest in Friday qualifying, you're the pole sitter no matter what. Even if you don't win the heat, you're starting first. You're opposed to the idea?
Starting first in the sprint race or starting first in the
race? Both. To where from what I've read is where if you're fastest in Q3, you're the pole sitter of the whole Grand Prix, regardless where you finish in the sprint race.
Okay, so the sprint race is really deciding positions 2 and back.
Yeah, and top 8 is the points this time around.
All right.
It's 8 through 1 rather than I think it would have been neat if it was the old top 8 points where it's 10, 8, 6, 5 through 1. Instead, it's 8 through 1.
So if you win that pole, right? Mm-hmm. There's really not a ton of incentive to really push it in the sprint race other than
get 8 points.
Get the points, yeah. So obviously the points are a good.
Well, it's a bit like the clash at Daytona, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So, although the clash at Daytona is just for money, it's for money. It's not for points.
Oh, sorry, the sprint races or the heat races, whatever they're called.
Yeah, the duels.
The duels.
Do they pay points for the duels?
Top 10.
Well, no, but if you qualify in the top 2 positions, that's where you start. No matter where you finish.
Right.
The duel,
yes.
Unless you go to a backup car.
Right. The front row is locked in. Yep. Absolutely,
yeah, the incentive is to win the duels and get 10 points to start the year.
All right. So we'll tune into this weekend and see how it goes. I'm optimistic about it. I'm all for kind of changing up formats and doing something a little fun, spicing up the show for the fans there. And I don't think that having a sprint race for qualifying order threatens the integrity of the sport at all, because having heat races and sprint races is as old as motor racing itself at the grassroots level. So
yeah.
All right, so I believe we are just about out of time. Anything we missed? Any last minute thoughts, guys?
The only last minute thought is I mentioned about Chase Elliott and all of that. We talked about multiple times. I know Richard has mentioned multiple times as far as racing efficacy and integrity. Gotta chill with with bumping into cars. It's one thing where, okay, it totally ruined somebody's racing, but none of them were terminal enough to where it's like, gotta keep grips into reality. It's like, just settle down. It kind of is one of those things, settle down moments. And I think both the 51 and the 9 cam need to settle down a bit, specifically the 51, because that's about the second time in the past year where one incident kind of became blown out of proportion than it ought to be. And I go back to Marsville when such driver was clashing big time with James Davison when Motorsport, the team had to tell him to calm down multiple times. And I think it needs to be emphasized a lot more towards like, well, then a particular group is going to have a banner name with those two torn fan bases, to say the least.
Yeah. Speaking of Cody Ware, is he going to do any IndyCar races this year?
He's fully committed to the Cup Series.
Yeah, because I hadn't heard that he was going to do any IndyCar race. That Sato's in that ride full time, but I didn't know if they were going to do the third car here and there for him this year, which is fine with me if they keep in NASCAR. So
yeah, there's no 52 car. It's evident with the entry list right now. It's just the curious thought of who's going to be the 33rd entry if we get a 33rd entry. Mark Miles has been adamant that there's going to be 33.
Oh, we'll get one. It's just a matter of, is it going to be a third McLaren, or is Juncos going to lease their chassis to somebody? So, but we can talk about who's not going to run it. So we know it's not going to be Beth Peretta. We're pretty sure it's not going to be Top Gun, because I think they're a little late at this point in time.
Yeah, and Stanch Racing is fully committed to the Cup program with Carso Marquez.
Right. Then the only other ones you can really look at here, maybe putting a program together in conjunction with Yukos, or maybe, these guys that are aligned with Stephen Wilson, or maybe even this Will Mariotti, who keeps saying he has a driver, but we have no idea who it is. But again, Will says he has a driver and some money, but doesn't have, a car, a crew, a shop, those sort of things. But Juncos does. So if whatever Mariotti has, money-wise and driver-wise, is palatable to Juncos, that might work. But again, I don't think Mariotti has the as much money as we think. I think when he has some money, I think it's pretty much he just got some money, and then still needs another lifeline from somebody or somewhere, or a sponsor to step up. So, but somebody will put a 33rd car in, and Miles will see to that. I mean, it's just like back in the days, Tony George, they got stuck at 32. He'd write a check and mail it to Buddy Lazier. So,
yeah, or kind of isn't that what got Paul Tracy back for Edmonton through Tony George?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean Tony George helped Al Jr. get his first ride in the IRL. I mean, Tony was when he first took over the series, trying to get the names in there and these sort of things, and boost the fields and whatnot. He a lot of his own money went to different teams and whatnot to help them with sponsors or to help them field a car. So, yeah. But Tony's out of the picture. But Roger's a lot less apt to spend his own money for those sort of things, and Roger's also adamant that they're going to run their 3 cars, run lean like that, and they're adamantly not going to add a 4th car, even though he does own the series and the speedway, so that car is going to come from elsewhere. Not to say that Roger may not help somebody financially, but I don't believe he's going to help anybody with a spare car and crew members like he did with Peretta last year.
Yeah, it's pretty much set in a stone that, this reason why Peretta's were Carpenter this year compared to Penske the year before. And it's kind of been in talks for a while, too. And it's also a neat progress for it, because obviously Ed being indie grown and all of that. It makes sense over time, the connection, especially how good their car are in terms of race speed. But road courses will be a curious one to see how they pan out. Simona has no secret has had success on road courses. I mean, the last time she drove one, I think she might have got a top 5 in 20 for Andretti too. Let's not forget.
Didn't she get a podium at one point in time?
I thought so with Andretti, but that was Justin Wilson.
I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, but
I think it was at an oval though.
She had some good runs with Andretti. And she's had a lot of really great runs in sports cars too. Let's not forget that. It's not as if she's been sitting on the shelf not racing. She's won several sports car races in between her last time being in an IndyCar. So, all right. So now we're well out of time in overtime. So it's time for the green, white, checkered. So I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I want to thank Dan Blay Dan Blay Racing Art. Find them on Facebook. Get your custom diecast car. I want to thank Mark Dill and the legend of the first super speedway. You can find him firstsuperspeedway.com. Find him online, order a copy of his book, and look through the historical records on that site there if you're a racing history buff. I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank you, Louise. I want to thank you folks that listen to us every week. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's wizard.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.